Hi.
She's here.
I'm
No.
here.
Hi.
I'm here.
Okay, and Lenine Gibson.
Lenine Gibson is here. Hi.
Okay, and there's another guest. Is there? There's another guest in here. No. Okay. There's Joe Di Benedetto. Hi, how are you? Laura, Esther, Mary, Janine.
Morning.
Debbie, Jin May, and there's another guest too. Another phone number, 917 number. Is that
That's
anybody?
Lamar. That's Lamar. Oh, he's leaving.
He left?
Well, he was switching over to.
Hey, Lamar,
I'm
good
here.
morning.
Oh, good. Yeah. So
Hello.
he's switching
How
over
are
to his
you?
computer soon. Yeah, he'll be on his computer soon.
So we have no UFT high school, correct?
I don't think so.
No? All right. So I'll reach out today to see if we still have Joe on the team or if James will be replacing him. And I'll let everyone know. And then we're still waiting for Charlene.
I don't think Charlene's coming. There's a big mock trial for the upcoming elections that she mentioned she might be attending.
Yeah, there's what is it? CPAC is doing elections.
For all.
Okay. All right. So I'll send her and James the information from the meeting today. All right. Good morning, everyone. I would like to open our October DLT meeting. Welcome. And I want to start, Lewis, with approval of the minutes. So can you please put the minutes up for us? Lindy, do you know if Superintendent Lindsay's coming today?
I believe she may not, so I will speak on her behalf, as well as Janine may be able to add as well.
Okay.
Can everyone see the minutes?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, we gave a lot of documents last month, huh?
I guess.
A lot of stuff.
Now, for all of you, wait, Lewis, for all of you, you know that if you're missing certain things, you could always go back into the chat. And Lewis, I like that's included in here, and Janet as well, like things that were shared in the chat.
Yeah.
Because you all have access to this meeting that you could go in anytime to pull stuff from the chat. So Gus, formerly known as Gus, has a new name.
New Gus.
New Gus. Redesigned Gus. New and improved Gus.
Gus 2.0.
Constant change.
Yeah.
And Charlene is on, Danielle. She's leaving at 10.
Hey, Charlene.
Hello, Charlene. I knew she was coming. She told me. How are
Good
you?
morning.
Hi,
Charlene. I'm good. How are you? I was making my coffee.
And that is a necessary thing.
I'm sorry.
Yes, it is.
I thought the training started at 9, but it's at 10. Sorry about that.
Yes, that's it. That's okay.
All right.
All right, so just so everyone knows, I also sent you a copy of the minutes on Thursday when I sent the reminder. Lenine, after today, I'm going to include you on the meeting information. Will you be here every meeting?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. I'll make sure I send you, I'm going to put you in my DLT list. All right. Okay, so can I get a motion to approve the minutes?
I move to accept the minutes as presented.
So moved, thank you. And a second?
I'll second the motion.
Thank you, Joe. So Charlene approved and Joe second. Okay. Louis, can you put up the agenda today?
I can. I also just put in the chat the link for the signature page.
Yep.
If everyone can just quickly fill out that form. So we have a record of everyone that's on the meeting.
All right, I'm going to briefly, while Louis puts up the chat, I just want to do a brief discussion around some of the things that are happening within the district. And then I'm going to turn it over to Gus, and then Mike and I will do our report last. But so we've had a pretty busy month, as you know, as we had a very successful school opening during a very messy situation. But our principals, our teachers, our staff members have just been phenomenal in welcoming our students back to school. There's been a couple of bumps in the road just in terms of making sure that we are up and running virtually, but each of our schools has systems to support students, teachers, as well as families around access to technology, as well as students who are struggling with logging on. Last week, Dr. Mike and I, actually since the beginning of school, Dr. Mike and I have spent time in schools looking at classrooms, and we're going to talk about some of the feedback that we've had from those classroom visits and how it's actually driving our instructional vision for this year and our goal setting practices and how we're implementing them within our action plans, which we rolled out and introduced to principals last week. And I'm actually really excited about it. You know, once again, District 25 is visionary, and we are engaging in big conversations about what's next for our students around learning within this pandemic and moving forward, and what we think that should look like. Many of our principals, as well as teachers, have been exposed to what New York City is focusing on in terms of priority standards and power standards, because we do know that the curriculum needs to be looked at very closely and carefully to make sure that we are addressing the highest leverage grade level standards to prepare our students, to make sure that they have a rigorous and engaging year this year, but are also ready to continue to move on to next year. Because eventually, when we are out of this pandemic, which I hope is any minute, you know, we do need to go full steam ahead. I wanted to allow Joe an opportunity, and Joe, I know I'm putting you on the spot, but I know you can do this really well, to kind of talk about what happened during our CEC meeting and parent concerns about the mandatory testing that has started on Friday. And then I sort of wanted to piggyback on what I saw when I visited one of our schools that went through that on Friday. And today I'll actually be going to our other three that are engaging in mandatory testing. So Joe, did you want to talk a little bit about some of the community concerns?
Sure. So you're really putting me on the spot here, but it's okay.
I know, I'm sorry. I could do it.
No, I could do it. So we had a meeting on last Wednesday, and it was basically based on the random testing and the concern of parents. And it came out that a lot of the parents in the community felt that if they did not sign that consent form, that their child would not be permitted to go to school. So they kind of felt somewhat forced to sign without knowing much about the details, including myself. So when it came out about certain questions that the parents had regarding PPE and where the test was going to be administered and whether or not they were forced to do it, and if they didn't want to do it, so on and so forth, there really were no answers on behalf of the representative from DOE. So, you know, it raised a lot of questions, and I believe a lot of parents walked away from the meeting thinking that look, I'm gonna redact my my consent form because I don't want my child to be tested, especially if I'm not around when my child's being tested. And we spoke about those mobile units that were outside some of the schools and those red zones or orange zones. And they weren't even able to answer if someone could use the results from that testing facility for the random testing, which it appears that they don't or they can't use it. So raised a lot of questions. Parents are saying, look, if we get our child tested and we know that our child is negative, why do we have to submit to the random test if it's going to be done within a few days? So a lot of questions and concerns with the community. But I have to tell you that I joined that meeting with the DOE where Dr. Varma was on, and he gave a medical presentation, which made me feel more comfortable as a parent. They actually showed the test that was administered, and it really was not that invasive, my opinion, but still a lot of open questions. And it was kind of a negative meeting in terms of what parents felt, but it was positive that we spoke about it and the issues were brought to the community. And sometimes talking about things, whether they're good or not, makes progress. So I'm hoping that it will make progress.
Yep. So thanks, Joe. I know that you and I were on that same meeting the following night, and there were a lot more of the medical questions that were answered. And a couple of things that also came out of that meeting that I had wished that we were able to have access to during our meeting. And I have definitely escalated that the parent concern was more around the fact that we could not answer questions. And it was Wednesday and testing was starting Friday, right? So that I could understand if we were, four thinkers and we wanted information well in advance, but it was 2 days. And so that has definitely been escalated, and especially the fact that there was a citywide presentation that was held 24 hours later. So I did escalate that, but you're absolutely right. I think parents were concerned of the sanitary nature of the test, and that was clarified Wednesday, that there are gloves changed after every test that's being done, and the items that the people administering the tests are wearing, and then I do believe and say, let me know if I was hearing this incorrectly, Joe, but I do believe they talked about why they can only take the tests from that day, because I believe a random sampling he spoke of is in that moment, right?
Correct. Yeah. So it was
yeah.
So basically for their purposes, rather than for the reality of whether or not students or administrators, teachers had the COVID. It's my opinion.
Yeah.
That's actually what it says in the FAQ also. That it has to be all the results that come in, go to the same lab, come back at the same time. And that's how we can say from Friday's test, they tested 1,900 people citywide on Friday, and only one person came back positive.
It's to reduce the variables.
Yes.
The more variables you add, the less reliable results are.
It makes sense.
Correct. But the thing that concerns a lot of parents is that it's voluntary, right? So if you have a small group that have these consent forms, that small group will always be tested. So how real is it, right? So if you have 100 students that consent and you have 400 students going to the school and it's the same 100 students because they signed the form, how real of an exam is this? And how real is what are we looking at?
Yeah,
right?
yeah, and also I think it's about something else that was brought up in the meeting that Joe and I were on, where a question was presented to the deputy chancellor around community trust, right? Because it's really about that. And I just want to spend a little time talking about what happened when I was with IS 25, talking to some of the students. But, she was really about, this is for safety and to be able to keep our schools safe and open, right? Like, so to make sure that we are continuing, you know, to engage in our socially distancing practices and the use of PPE, but this random testing will allow us to isolate people who may be asymptomatic or right at the beginning of the illness, and then also the virus, and then also to be able to keep schools open, right? When parents asked about not being able to come back to school if a child refuses, she said the first layer, and correct me if I was wrong, Joe, but the first layer is about giving information and education around the importance of testing. So it is not if your child doesn't test when they're supposed to the first day that they can't come back to school the following day. I do believe that, you know, there is this process of informing the parents of the importance of testing, having the parents speak to the child, having us speak to the child. So I think that's really where she kind of changed the narrative of what some of our parents were feeling. Do you agree, Joe?
I agree, yes.
And that goes back to your experience at IS-25, Danielle. I mean,
yeah.
As people see that this isn't that bad and the experience isn't that bad, hopefully more people will give consent.
Yeah, so I'm a visual learner, and I have to learn from experience, which is like bad. And my mother always hated it because I was always getting burnt because I was like, don't tell me, I have to do it. So so Friday I did go to IS-25, and I observed the testing protocols, and I myself got tested. And to be honest, just so everybody knows, there's a picture of me crying because I am a big baby, but it did not
Can I put the picture up
at all. Yes, you could put the picture up. It did not hurt at all, but I am crying only because I'm a baby, just so you know. And actually, some of the kids were like, really? So, but I'm glad I got through that because today's elementary school testing. So one of the things that I did want to say is the people that were doing the testing were wonderful. They were organized. They answered any question that anybody asked them, a teacher, a child, the administration. They were really happy to do that. The testing, it was is that me? No, that's Mary Ellen. This is Miss Byrne getting tested. And then, yeah, your computer's. This is me. See, I'm crying. I'm like, oh my God.
Oh my God, you're so dramatic.
There's me. Okay. But it was really nothing.
Not bad.
It really is. So it is. I know one of the things that they talked about was. I now get my picture off of that. Okay. Thank you. I know one of the things that they talked about is that it is not as invasive as the other tests, and that was 100% correct. If you look at your pointer fingertip, the first line of your finger, that is, I mean, mine is small, but that is as far as they go into your nose, like that. They do not, they go right, you know, at the beginning of the nostril area. And the staff, our staff, were talking to kids as they were waiting online in socially distanced line, and they said to the kids, like, do you feel comfortable? Because you do not have to test if you do not feel comfortable. And every child that was there, I think after the first round happened, they all went and told their friends, and then there were kids actually asking to be tested. And as long as they had the consent forms on file in the middle school, they were allowing them to test. So I just, I think our meeting was, had kind of set a stage that was not the way things actually went. So Joe and I are actually working to try to fix that. So we wanted to just let all of you know that, answer any questions that you may have had about the testing. And then, you know, I hope Christine, you and Laura, we can kind of open up a forum again during President's Council. If you don't mind, I'll be happy to come there and talk. And then also maybe Joe could come and be that parent person, because, you know, he was the advocate for parents as the president of the CEC, and then he's also gone through the other trainings with us. Maybe, I don't know if we can do this, but if you don't mind, maybe we can ask to have someone come back with a little bit more clarity, or if you just want Joe and I to do it, it's fine. And then we'll still continue to escalate some of the questions that were asked that may have not been answered.
I think it's important to have somebody from the medical community maybe come in, because it wasn't at our meeting. And I think if like I'm not saying Dr. Varma, but he clarified a lot of things, and the video was important. I think one thing I wanted to say, Danielle, is you made a point that struck me, is a lot of the students wanted to be tested. I know they're middle school students, and as a parent, I want to know, right? So I'm okay with it. It's just the procedure, or the way things were handled. So if we can, clean that up a little bit, maybe you'll get more positive reaction from families. Of course, the younger students, is a different story, because first grade is pre-K. The grammar school is a little different, but I would think most people would want to know, and you get the results quickly.
Yep.
Right?
Well, I'm going to be there today. We have 129. They're at 129 right now. I spoke with them this morning. They're coming to 379, which is another middle school, at 10:30, which I said I'd kind of pop in following our meeting, and then I'm going to go to PS 29 and be there where they're supposed to report there from 12:30 to 2. So I will, I will be able to report back on that as well. But I will definitely do that. And Christine and Laura, I'm going to have Esther work through FACE, because FACE was the one that had the meeting right after ours. And Esther, maybe you can communicate with FACE to see if we can get somebody from the medical field to come speak at President's Council to sort of answer some of the questions that the community was asking, and I can give you sort of the language that if you read in the chat, that is really what they were saying. Like, somebody from the medical team around this work should be able to present to the community.
I'll ask them.
Okay. All right, perfect. Anybody have any questions about the testing? And
I have one question.
yes.
When they do these random sampling of the children, now if they do, like, say for instance, for October, they picked my son in October. Will they pick my son again in November?
That could happen. It could happen, right? But one of the things that I was saying is, now that I've had it done and it was nothing, I'll get it done every minute.
Gotcha.
So, to test me monthly, I would be okay with that.
Yeah.
If a parent did have concern, I would say we can definitely, we could definitely surface that. But that was also brought up too, just around if there's only a small sampling of families that hand in their consent forms, then those kids may be tested over and over again, and it's not really a sampling.
Right. I think a lot of parents are concerned with that. Now, if my child got tested this month, are they going to be the only one being tested every month? Because like you were saying, if they're the only ones that sent the consent form, what kind of sample is that? You haven't seen being tested.
Right. So
that doesn't help.
Right. So that was one of the questions that came up at the training, where the deputy chancellor talked about that is why we want to be able to speak to the community about the importance of getting as many people to consent as possible. So we do have the sampling. For me, it's sort of free testing, to be able to go in and get tested, every month, every couple of weeks. But for the intent of what the testing is about, which is to keep our children, our staff, our schools safe and open, to only have a small group that's always tested is really not doing what it's intended to do. So we'll continue to surface that. And that's
not to interrupt you. Can I comment one more time? I'm sorry. The question is, what happens if you don't have enough consent forms? So if they're testing 10% of the students that are in the blended, or whatever it is, 20%, we still don't know what happens. So if you don't have enough forms and you don't have enough students being tested, then are they going to shut the school down, or are they going to make them all go remote? I still have not received an answer on that issue, right?
Right. Yes.
Joe, I don't think you're going to get an answer.
Right. Because I think, Joe, their starting place would be around education. So if there's a particular school that has very low consent, I think it would be about working directly with that community to see if we can get more families to consent before any type of decisions are made. So that is the first place to start. And then we don't know the answer. You know, eventually, if a school continues to refuse consent, I don't have the response to that. But I do know it's not going to be right away, which is what some parents thought.
Thanks.
Okay, so, but that's all the more reason why I think now that Joe and I got a little bit more information and we have a handle on it, why we wanted to ask Laura and Christine if it would be okay to sort of bring this up again at the next President's Council meeting, because now we can answer questions a little bit more than we could last Wednesday.
And I hate to keep honing in on this, Danny, I'm sorry, but just, and Lamar is here, so if the community also understands, if a teacher refuses, there are ramifications for the teacher, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Teacher would have to go on unpaid leave for what I believe is 14 days. Yes.
Yeah, and I will also tell you though, at IS 25, 100% of the teachers tested, even those that weren't on the list. They volunteered to test, so that was really good, and they wanted to do that for each other, you know, to just say like we're all working together. We want to make sure that we're all healthy, that you know there's not an issue in our school, and so they all voluntarily tested. The organization comes with a certain amount of tests, and they could only test, you know, up to that. So they had 100 tests, and I think on Friday they wound up testing 89 people. So,
which makes sense because it corresponds with the amount of per school. If they were X number of students in the school, they would bring certain number of tests to support.
Yeah. So on that day, there were 200 students that were supposed to report. Not everybody was in school, and not everybody had consent forms, but they were able to test 20% of the students on that day.
And I think on a positive note, it was very organized. People were in, people were out. They managed the line rather efficiently. So, you know, those types of things and nerves, you know, from being able to see it myself as well. A very organized process, you know, and it was not overly time consuming to go in, get your test and come out. So, you know, those are all positives that I also was able to observe too.
Yeah. Okay, any other questions before we move on? Okay. No. Oh yeah, go ahead. No? Okay. All right, so Gus, if you don't mind doing your presentation first.
Oh, sure.
Thank you.
Good morning, everybody.
Hey, Gus.
My new acronym is DSFP, by the way. That's Director of Federal Policy Implementation, DSFP. Every once in a while, I get a new title. On the DCP template, I attended a meeting, I think it was Thursday or Friday. It has now been finalized, but I don't have a copy to share yet because I guess it has to be approved. So here's the story. It's an update year, so it's not a full DCEP. There's no overview section. There's basically it's like the schools in good standing. Goals and progress monitoring is what we're doing. And we have the 100.11 and the parent engagement policy section to do. There are no pillars. I'm sharing. I have to, let's see. I forgot to go. I have to share my screen, but you can't see it yet, right? Let me see. Yeah. Okay. Can you see that? There are no pillars and there are no tenets anymore. Can everybody see my screen on DCP sections?
No, you're not sharing it.
I'm not. Okay. Let me close this and go back. I thought okay. I see I have to click on this maybe.
There you go.
All right, so let me get that up now. Can you see it now?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So basically, there are no pillars, there are no tenants. The sections of the DCEP are these sections here. It's English language. It's English language arts for K to 8, math K to 8, supportive environment K to 8, and 2 high school pieces: graduation rate and college and career civic readiness. Now, there's nothing to stop you from adding some high school pieces into these other sections, but it's really designed to that these 2 are the high school sections, and the rest of it is the sections that we'll speak to. And there's also an option like the schools have where you can add a section, an area of concentration, if you wish to. So the notion is to make it as simple and as easy as possible, given what all the things that are going on this year, and for it to be an update. So as soon as I get the approval, I'll be sharing it. And I understand that we have preliminary goals already, so we're in a good shape. And the high school folks, like they did last year, will work on their sections, and we'll be able to finalize it on time. Usually they want it done by the end of January. Citywide, it drags on, but your district, like most of my districts in Queens, are very efficient, and we get it done on time or ahead of time. There is, I'll speak to the 100.11 and the parent piece a little further down on the agenda. I'm looking at the agenda in front of me that was handed out. Any questions on what I said so far? Okay, if not, then I'll move on to the next topic, which is about data and the goals. That's on the agenda because this is, we're given topics from Central on what these DLTs should be working on. Most districts, or I should better say a significant number of districts, have not done goals like you have. They also didn't do a lot of data analysis with the data that we had last year. I actually called Mike and we spoke about this prior to the meeting. The only new data that I have, and I don't know whether you already have it already, Mike, or not, is I have some chronic absenteeism data, and I have new ethnic census data, which is your demographics. Other than that, all the testing data, and I understand that from the minutes of last year, graduation rate data is coming from the high school folks. So we really don't have new data to analyze given the goals. We could revisit some of it, but we don't have to do a full data analysis, it seems to me, in District 25, because we already did it. What my intention is to share the data that I have with Mike, and if Mike thinks that there's anything new here and it relates to our goals, then next meeting we'll talk about it. Is that pretty much accurate based on our conversation, Mike?
Yeah, we had reviewed the state accountability data from 19. Obviously 1920, there's limited information there, but we did review that in terms of performance levels of our schools across a variety of subgroups. We did do that. We can revisit it again just to make sure everyone. And chronic absenteeism data that we will be reviewing throughout the year, and we'll do those monthly updates. Little interesting right now in terms of we We just have to be mindful of the fact that we only have a couple of weeks in. So some of that data will, the percentages will not necessarily be as reliable as if we had multiple weeks of time in. But yes, we'll review that too, Gus.
Yeah, basically, Mike, what I have in terms of chronic absenteeism data is I have it up until the end of March. And I'm told that that indicates what schools might be, have a level 1 in terms of chronic absenteeism, in which case, that's something that they have to address in their CEPs.
Yeah, so what I was referring to, Gus, was moving forward from here on in. So as a DLT, we can look at what that data looks like moving forward, and in a variety of different ways, right? So we have in school, we have blended remote, and then we have fully remote. So we'll be looking at the data points according to that as well.
Okay, great. All right. So if there aren't any other comments or questions, I'll move on to the next topic, which I understand we have our goals, preliminary goals, and you and Danielle are going to be going over them. On the parent engagement plan, we need to update that and adopt it because we adopted it for 2 years, and I believe it runs out. And some of the terminology may change, so it should be on an agenda, and we should look at it and update it. In terms of the 100.11 plan, remember what the 100.11 plan is. That is the plan for how the DLT in the district support check on SLT health. One of the major ways that that's done is that a survey goes out from FACE. The survey was supposed to go out last academic year, but because of COVID, it did not go out. This is under discussion, I'm told, with FACE at the present time. Hopefully, it will come. Remember, they send out a survey to all SLT members in every district. We get the results back, and then based on that, we update and any other information that we have based on our referrals from SLTs or interactions, we update the plan. So what's currently in the DCP, I just put a note on the old one that we hope to update it this year. So that's the status. I would suggest that we put the parent engagement policy on the agenda for next time, and maybe people can be emailed it and look at it ahead of time. If you need a copy of the old one that's in the DCP, I can cut and paste and send that out. That's not a problem. That is that item. Any questions on those two, the 100.11 plan and the parent engagement policy? Boy, this is easy today. Okay. The next item is an interesting one. The CEPs. I just prior to this meeting, I emailed my old friend and colleague Matt Svilick. It was according to the timeline, which I believe you all have. I can put that up. Let's see, is this the timeline? Yes. It was supposed to be released on the 9th. It got delayed now to today. So the action plan, the schools in good standing are just updating their action plans and progress monitoring in iPlan. In the Principals Weekly, it said that today was the day that this was going to be done. Early this morning, I emailed Matt because what I wanted was a guidance document for schools on using the iPlan action plan builder, like we had for the goal builder. It's basically, folks, the same thing. What they do is they will, let's see what I have here. What's this? they there are these tiles, and they work on the tiles, and this is what they have to the sections that the AOCs, the areas of concentration, are already pre-selected. But these are what they call the business rules, which show you what every school is supposed to do in each category. And the tiles, you click on the tile and you fill in the action plan and you fill in the progress monitoring for each area of concentration, just like the schools did for the goals. So it's not hard to do. In fact, I'll be doing it for 2 of our improvement high schools. So I'll be getting some hands-on experience. But when I emailed Matt to see if he had a guidance document, he told me that they're still doing some tweaking on the on iPlan. So I guess it'll be open for school use later on today. I haven't gone on iPlan to see whether you can access it yet. Has anybody done that this morning? I guess not. So
actually, Mike and I were on there this morning for a few minutes.
Okay, did it work? Were you able to get into action plan tiles?
Actually, that was a question that we wanted to ask you when you were done, just in terms of something that they were saying. They would Mabel wrote to us about certification of individual schools.
Okay.
And I thought we did that.
Yes. I got a call. I got an email. I think it was last night from one of your colleagues, and my response was, as far as I know, you've certified everything.
Okay.
That's because, again, I'm so proud of this district and my districts in Queens. You did everything ahead of time. We still have districts in the city that have not done the attestation and certification of the budget and goals alignment. You took care of that long ago. So my response to the other superintendent was, yes, you did it. And my response to you is, yes, you did it. All 4 of my districts have done it. Or 5, if you add in the high schools, Superintendent Lindsay took care of it as well. So we're completed. There's no issue as far as that is concerned. And all of these reports that come out, our completion has been 100% for quite some time. So I anticipate that by the end of the day, schools will be able to go into iPlan and begin entering their action plans and progress monitoring pieces. That's one of my main activities. I fully anticipate getting emails and calls from principals and schools about issues that come up and access and so on. And as I've told you many, many times, that's what I do. So if anything comes to your attention, please have the schools email or, and I will find out what's going on and help them through that process. So the schools will be working on that, and the timeline will be updated accordingly. There should not be a lot of difficulty, because it's basically the same process that was done earlier. So as soon as I get the guidance document and updated information, I will email that to you, so you have any resources that I am able to access in terms of helping the schools complete that. Any questions on iPlan and the CPs? Okay. Last item, the SLT and Title I training. Let's see, I have something on that. Okay. Okay, this is what came out in Principal's Digest, with the timeline. October 16th, by the way, there's a webinar, and Christine and I have interacted on this. It's a webinar on Title I, and it is for BCO staff and district staff. DLT members can participate in that, but it's not really for them. I had a interaction with the executive superintendent's office, and I asked if we could handle SLT and DLT training and district training for Title I and SLTs the way we have in the past, not doing it in terms of a BCO or some other configuration as a whole, but doing it by district the way we have for many, many years in the past. And I was told I could go ahead and do it the similar kind of way. So in terms of, I have a PowerPoint which we could adopt, which is the PowerPoint that on October 16th they'll use for this citywide training that they're doing. I believe it's at 1 o'clock. It was announced, and it runs for about an hour, hour and a half on the 16th in the afternoon. And then I'll have that document, and I think I have something else as well. Yeah, there's a document that I have that was developed for parents for the Title I set aside. It's an optional document. It's just, again, something that parents can use in terms of planning for the 1% set aside. So I also have a flyer like I have in the past that we could use. So on our on your discussion, and it could be discussed now or leave it for next time. October 30th is the deadline where schools are supposed to hold their meeting. So if you want to do something just for Title I by October 30th, we need to sort of discuss that and plan it out. If we want to do it after October 30th and combine it with SLT training the way you have in the past, we could do that. So I'm open. That's a topic for discussion in terms of the DLT, how you want to handle it. There is nothing dramatically new with Title I. There have been, Christina has asked some questions about the PAC role and the PAC engagement. And that is something that is embedded in the webinar and in the PowerPoint that I have. And that'll be discussed on the 16th and can play more of a, a role in whatever we do in terms of the PowerPoint that we'll do for our remote training. So I leave that to the DLT, the superintendent, to throw as an item for discussion and going forward. Title I and SLT training, separate, combined, however you want to do it, and coming up with a date and a time and a way of reaching out to people in this remote environment. So I think that's my last item. Let me see if I can get rid of all of these things and go back to the screen.
You could just stop sharing, Gus.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking for.
Right there, right there.
Okay,
you see the X?
there I go. And I'll stop sharing. Okay. And I think I'm back on the screen, right?
Yep.
Okay,
All
good.
right, so thank you, Gus. The first thing that I'd want to present to the DLT for consideration is that, as you know, the 31st is the deadline for elections and for PTAs, and SLTs will not be, SLT elections are part of that process. So I wouldn't want to do anything prior to that, That's just my recommendation, because there will be new members that will be joining PTAs and SLTs. That probably their first meeting will be sometime in November. I don't know, Gus, in terms of maybe us doing the training virtually for the entire community in either late November. Well, we can't do late November because it's Thanksgiving, or during our December, during sometime in early December. Just because we want to be able to give the new SLT members an opportunity to be part of their team. Normally, these elections would have taken place in June, but now they're not taking place till the 31st. That being said, I would be more than happy to put Title I and DLT training together. However, we may be able to do Title I training before that as a separate training. And then Christine, you may be able to use that opportunity to do some PAC training. So we could do Title I and PAC and then DLT separately, but I'm willing to hear feedback from the team.
My approach is flexibility. Whatever the district feels it's appropriate, that's the way for me to go.
I think that we should wait till after we have the SLT elections, and do it after.
I agree with Christine, but also, Gus, can I have the link to that training coming up on the 16th? Because in your document, it says that the PTA president will hold the CPAC election. I mean, what do you call those? The PAC elections, and explain the role, what they do.
It's the old title. It's basically the old Title I committee, like the old Title I.
I still don't know what they do. I don't know the exact description.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
So
right.
Someone can send that to me. That'd be great.
Yeah, you mean for the 16th training?
Yes.
Sure. I'll send that out to Danielle, and it could be sent out to everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah. Do you have it right now?
No, I don't have it. What I have to do is I have to look for it and see. It's probably in field service, in the digest, and I'll have to cut it out and send it out, because the training is for BCOs and DLT and district staff. DLTs are supposed to plan their own. But remember, I brought this whole issue based on our previous meetings to Sharon Renscher and Rosanna Topolitano. And so I think the expectation is that at least your DLT can participate. So I will send that out, and I apologize for not having it handy. I'm
gonna also have Esker escalate this to FACE, because this is a FACE problem, right? So like there needs to be training for our parent leaders around managing and supporting PACs. And, I'm not even gonna get into it, but it's very easy for everybody to go, oh, the DLT does it, oh, the district does it, and that's because nobody wants to do it. But there's somebody out there that has this information, and now this is the second parent leader on a DLT who is saying that. So first Christine, and now Charlene. And so at some point, we need to answer to that, because those are the things that blow up in our face, and shame on us as a organization for not putting something like that together. That's all I have to say. I mean, if you need me to do it, I'll do it. But, I'm also doing 500 other things. And it seems to be that everybody's passing this request off to someone else. Just do a training around PACs. That's it. It's not a big deal. And there's somebody out there that knows how to do it. And they surfaced it. They said it was mandated. We put our teams together. We got parent leaders to run them. And now nobody wants to train them. So I know it's not you, Gus, but this should not be something that says that if the DLT could do it, Charlene and Christine would not be asking for support. So
well, we can organize something, and I can do it along with I can ask Andrea Ferguson, who is our Title I person for the Office of Federal and State Policy, to participate. All
I mean,
we gotta
I'm
do
sure
is schedule it.
Christine and Charlene would be able to bring the PAC representatives from every school to a training like that. And that, you know, and that is all that they were asking for, to kind of bring all these adult leaders together and train them in how to manage this, instead of just, because look, and you know as well as I do, that it's not just about selecting how to spend this money, because when we were selecting models for schools, what came out of certain offices were, and please let your school PAC reps know. So they do hold a position that that is a parent leadership and part of a consultation body of school decision making, and therefore they should have the appropriate training, and not everybody just say, oh, the superintendent does it, you know. So and like I said, I'm not saying that for you. I'm actually speaking on behalf of Christine and Charlene, because you know, this is the second group of parents, you know, second time now, and Christine and Charlene don't really speak to each other. I mean, I know they speak to each other because they've worked together, but Charlene is high school, Christine is still in the district. I know that they didn't get together and say, oh, let's ask this at a DLT meeting. You have two different parents asking a similar question, and I think we should do that.
Well, if Charlene and Christine will tell me when they want to do it, I will organize it. Like, fair
What
enough?
do you think, ladies?
Oh, God. I don't even know when, because every time I turn around, I get a 24-hour notice that there's a meeting the next day, like I don't have a full-time job. Yes, I'm talking about CPAC, which is about to happen in 2 minutes.
Well, Charlene, I think what Gus is saying, because I just went on a mini tirade, I think what Gus is saying is that he will run it for you and Christine and your PAC leaders. If, you know, and if you give him dates and you reach out to the PAC leaders to make sure those dates work, that he will do that. So
Right.
I appreciate
Just
that.
give me a date
Okay.
and a time and I'll set it up.
I just
No.
need to know, when does it have to be done by?
Well,
There's
that's up to you.
no limit on this.
Oh,
But
thank
what
God.
I do know,
November.
right, because remember, Charlene, when you were the Title I rep for us, we were not required to have PACs in schools.
I know.
Right, and now we are. So it is a new thing for the district. And last year, Esther and Christine worked to put them together. But what we're finding is these parent leaders have a lot of questions, and so this training would be for them, you know, to just understand the role of a PAC, which is what you were asking when you were the Title I rep, right? Like how do
Yes.
yes. So now we're saying we need this training, and Gus is now graciously offering to do it. So if you and Christine on a separate kind of email to each other could come up with some dates, and then Gus would be happy to put that together, and then you could communicate that to the PAC leaders in your schools, and they could be part of the training as well. I mean, we have a parent in one of our schools who is very angry that there hasn't been any PAC training. She's constantly calling Esther about it. So I think this is a good, no, seriously. And you know what?
No, I'm laughing because I know who that miserable person is.
Yeah,
she called me on Friday again.
but she's not wrong. She's not wrong.
No,
And
she's
Which
not.
person is that? I must have missed that memo.
yes, but
Name will be
no, but wait,
in a minute.
no, we don't say name, but that's what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, we need to get this training together. So actually, you guys, Esther will email you guys if you can give some dates, and then Gus will forward them to Gus, and then Gus will confirm, and you can send it out to your parents. You know, the
Okay.
package. All right.
Thank you.
Christine, Charlene, do you have the link for the upcoming training coming up? Can you share with me?
Which one? The one for today in 2 minutes?
Yes.
I sent it to you last night.
All right, let me check. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Sorry
Okay.
about
All right. So hopefully that'll be taken care of.
Thank you,
And
Gus.
we can move on. We can move on to all the other things that you have on your plate.
Yep. Okay. So thank you very much. Anybody else have any questions for Gus? Okay. So Dr. Mike.
Yes.
What were you planning on starting, just so I can kind of frame this?
I was just going to go do a quick review of the goals for where we land thus far.
Perfect.
And then bring us into a quick conversation around a small minor adjustment to the mission based on the feedback that was received, and then into our conversation around current reality inside of our schools and where as parents they see learning, whereas teachers we see learning, and whereas administrators we see learning right now.
Yep, perfect. So as Dr. Mike is putting up the goals, I just want to let you know that we've really been spending some time kind of living in the wording of the goals that we had set for last year. And then also at the same time, looking at where our schools currently are. And as you know, goals and action plans are yearly. And right now we are in a time where this is not what we're used to, right? So we want to make sure that we're living our goals in a way this year that is in service of supports for teachers around the blended and remote learning environment, as well as rigorous and engaging instruction and curriculum for our students as we are engaging, in learning in this environment. So go ahead, Dr. Mike.
Okay, so I put in the chat the Pear Deck link so that you guys will have access to it yourselves as we're going through. Nice part about that, if you need to go back and forth between slides, you can do that on the bottom. You'll see that where my cursor is right here. It's 3 of 21. You'll be able to go back and forth if there's something that you missed or want to revisit. You can always go back yourselves as we're going through this presentation. So as you guys know, our district vision, growing together for our children's future, the strong root schools theme. This is part of the work that we talked about during last month's DLT, and then conversation around and getting feedback from you guys around our district. Ooh, that title's wrong. My apologies. Our district mission statement. To the left is the one that we had previously. To the right is a small adjustment that is in orange from what you see on the left. So if everyone would just take a quick minute, I'm not going to read that to you. Just give a read over both of those statements, and then we can come back together briefly to have a quick little chat around anything that you see as needing an additional adjustment for our district mission, at least currently.
Mike, can I make a recommendation in the second layer? You see where it says, I mean, because I think the parents will see this now, and I mean, the team will see this now. We believe that in order to foster citizens of the world, going up, problem solving, creativity, and instead of student ownership, can't we say student of their learning, student ownership and agency, right? So that's a lot of what we're talking about with Will Richardson now. An agency is the choice and desire to learn, right? So, like, we can create opportunities for student ownership, but we also should create opportunities that lead to student agency, right? So.
Anyone else, any comments? One of the pieces that I thought was really important as I reviewed some of the feedback that you guys had shared was this purposefulness of our data use. When we're talking about the equity for our learners, is that we not only have the data, but we're looking at it purposefully and actually using it So I happened to have an opportunity to view a few webinars, and there is a leading researcher in, globally by the name of John Hattie. And what he talked about was this idea that we have enough evidence. There are people that are clamoring for more and more data, more and more data. And what he's basically saying is that we have data, we just need to do a better job of interpreting it and actually using it. So this whole idea of purposeful analysis, and that was kind of the way it was written in the feedback that from one of you guys during the last session, and that's why I added it in here, because I thought it was an important piece that you guys shared. But is there any other feedback that you guys have about our district mission at this point?
I would add in, I'm sorry.
Yeah, John.
I would add in use and application. In other words, applying it to.
Right after access, right? Right. So where it says so you look at it purposefully and then you provide. Oh wait, maybe. Oh, you mean purposeful use?
Use and application of the data, right? So we're applying it.
That's right. I thought it was
Analysis, use, and application.
Yeah.
I mean, that's my opinion. I don't know what the others feel.
What do we think, everyone? Let me blow this up a little bit. Make it a little bit bigger so everyone can give it a look.
I like it. I like it because I think that's something that we've been working on as a DLT and as a district also, just about what and how we're looking at data. So I like the way that's phrased and how we use it to support certain groups of students, right? So we know that we've had achievement gaps that have been occurring year over year. And what we've discovered, especially as a team, is that we've been looking at data, we've been organizing data, but we haven't been purposefully, and I like that word, applying it to the needs of the learners identified in our data. So I like it.
I mean, like anything else, this can always be something we come back to, and I think should be part of conversations moving forward at each of the meetings. Not only that we have this mission statement and vision statement, but that we are, and what we talked about with our building leaders is this idea, and you'll hear in a few minutes during a video, that we're living what this statement says. Are we doing the things that we say that we want to see? It's one thing to say that we want to see it, but it's another to say that we're living it. And I think that's the important part of having this mission statement, and one that we can continue to come back to.
And I also think it's the framework and foundation by which our building leaders and our schools and our SLTs, if they understand this as an expectation, they can use it within their own framing of their mission and vision and goals. And you'll actually see through some of our goals that we'll present to you today that the ideas within the mission that we just added are represented in our goals as well.
So any thoughts before we move on? Any additional comments? And I'm gonna stay inside of the Google Slides just for now, in the event that there's something that I need to change based on feedback. And you guys can continue to follow along the Pear Deck slides. It's the same exact slides, it's just that it's in a different platform. So our district goal, and this will be something that we continue to revisit and share, but in terms of our mission statement, we'll make sure that it becomes updated in all of our documents so that it's accessible to our schools and our individual school leadership teams to revisit their own mission statements to see how it aligns with what we're asking at the district level. So district goal review, I still have this connected to the tenets. I hadn't changed it because there was not necessarily a completed version, but I will now because it does just go based on ELA math supportive environment. But here you will see our current school leadership goal. Let me blow this up a little bit so that we can give a quick look. And inside of here, you'll see that piece where Danielle was talking about it being evident from the mission statement to the goals around this idea of disrupting patterns of disproportionality. And Joe, that's where we would be talking about that application that you were referencing, which I think is an important part of this whole process through the lens of MTSS. And that's where we're talking about supporting the diversity of needs that we have across our schools and within classes and individual children. So you'll see that embedded inside of this this goal in and of itself. But if everyone would just give it a quick read, and anything there that does not make sense to you or needs to be revisited. And remember, this goal was based on data that we've seen over time. We looked at it through the lens of accountability data from the state. Obviously, we don't have it from last year because there were no state assessments, but this is from 18-19 accountability data. So give it a minute.
I'm sorry, I think sometimes I'm brain dead with all these acronyms. MTSS.
That's fine, Joe. It's multi-tiered systems of support. So basically, in a nutshell, what it means is that there are three tiers inside of a school system. Tier 1 is basically what all children receive inside of their classroom in terms of interventions and supports. Tier 2 is a little bit more intensive in terms of maybe a program that a child might receive versus another in order to help them get to the place where they need to be. And Tier 3 means that there are some deficits there and there needs to be more intensive action in order to get a child up to speed.
Is there base practices? You say you have an S at the end?
Thanks, Lamar.
No problem.
Hey, Fred, how are you?
Anything else, guys? Joe, did that answer that question?
Yes, it did. Now it makes sense.
Okay.
Thank you.
You got it. Okay, this one is going to wind up becoming our ELA goal based on the new template that the city is going to be providing us. Instead of having it align with the tenants, we'll just connect it to ELA because that's what the end result for this goal was anyhow.
It's fine. Hold on one second. Let me just turn this up. Hold on one second. My Fred came in here.
Yeah. Am I going, Danielle, or you need me to pause?
I got it.
Okay. So again, if we can just review the ELA, what will be our ELA goal? We adjusted it based on the tenants, but we don't, seeing as that's not necessary now, we will move this as our ELA goal because that's the end result that we were looking for in terms of improvement. So give this one a look for a minute and we'll move on.
So can I just make a comment on this one, which is kind of where we are connecting to our mission and vision. So we know from the work that we've done historically as a DLT that disproportionality in our achievement gaps, especially for our Black, Hispanic, and our L students, is something that we've had to look at. But one of the things that Mike and I are talking about, which will move you through a little bit more today, is that now is a really good time to look at, you know, our data systems and instructional core, the teaching and learning aspect and the relationship between teaching and learning and students, a little bit more strategically because of the times that we're in, right? And so we know that we have to look at the instructional core as a whole, but at the same time, while we're in this new learning phase, we should reconnect and re-elevate and ensure that our subgroups are performing in ways that we want to see everyone perform, right? So, so that'll be clear as we talk about the work that we just have started with our principals and in asking these big questions. But I want you guys to kind of focus on that as well as we go to the next stage of this.
So Danielle, I'm thinking also just as you're saying that, and the addition we just placed inside of the mission, perhaps we can also include agency in each of the goals within math and ELA as well. Mm-hmm. You know, so which promotes high expectations, rigorous learner-centered practices, and student agency.
Yep. And you know, that's also something that Joe and I have been talking about a lot, just in terms of students in, you know, especially our remote learners, and what student agency means for them, you know. So what does their learning environment look like? What can we create? What are our expectations? How do we get students to a place where they understand that, you know, being on time for your remote class and ready to learn is an important part of what learning is about. And right now it's hard for our students because they don't see that as learning. They see in school, sitting in a classroom with your teacher talking to you as learning. They don't see the remote side of this world. And that's where we're talking about in terms of agency as well.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else? Any comments? I know we've looked at these a couple of times already, so we won't spend too much time unless, as you've looked at it, there are things that you feel we should be taking into account. Okay. Move on to what will now become our district math goals. So let me just change the title of this. Blow this up a little bit so that we can all see. Okay, if we can give that one a minute to review as well.
Why do we anticipate a decrease?
So it's in the achievement gap, Lamar, meaning if we had a 10% gap between them, reducing that to a 7% gap.
Okay. Would it be better feasibly to explain where you would reach the 7% cap as opposed to just saying a 3% decrease?
Say that again?
So if you, for the reasons you explained in anticipating that decrease, but your gap would still be at 7%, would it be better to explain that process rather than to just focus on the 3% decrease? Because the language of it attracts your attention to say, why would people anticipate a decrease? As opposed to, you know, it would be at a 7%, it would decrease, but it would still be at a 7% increase. No?
So, I mean, the thing with achievement gap is that you can actually have your kids improve by 10%, but the gap stays the same when compared to other subgroups. So we're basically trying to say, and I hear you, maybe we can, you know, work on the language at the end. But the idea was that, you know, we're looking to have these targeted subgroups reduce the gap between them and their counterparts that are performing at a higher rate. So it would mean that if both of them performed at an equal performance, we haven't really changed the gap. You follow what I mean?
Yes. Okay.
So if we both go, if all subgroups go up by 5%, we didn't change the gap. All we did was stay status quo.
Actually, Lamar, that's how we originally wrote our goal a year ago, and somebody gave us feedback in the community that saying just what Mike is saying. So that's why we phrased it this way. But I see what you're saying. Somebody who doesn't recognize what an achievement gap is may say, why would you want to go down? Right?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, no, I get it. We'll have to play with the language to make that a little bit more clear. That's good. Anyone else? Any other comments? And notice I put in virtual learning labs. We are going to try to do some visits virtually if we can this year to see some really good math practices across our schools. I do think it's important for our teachers and building leaders to see really good practice from one another.
I also think it's important for our students to see that people are watching their learning virtually. And that's that whole concept of agency. Like, what makes you want to log on and learn, right? So to know that there are people who are interested in the learning and that are present and part of that work. And they want to see your work, what that looks like. They want to see your virtual conversations. I think it would move this whole idea of changing the narrative about what student learning can and should look like.
Yeah, and the whole idea of just about promoting voice for kids, and I know that Danielle is really, really big in pushing towards that end. The whole idea about agency also is for students to be able to communicate what's going on in their learning. So I think all of those things will hopefully be connected as we go through the school year. Was there any more comments on math before I move forward? Once, going twice.
So.
Okay, and social emotional learning. This one will be changed to the supportive environment goal that Gus had flashed up earlier. I'll just change the title and make sure that all of these get retitled and shared with everyone so that it's clear across all of our schools that this is the language that we will be using at the district level as well. But if we can give this goal a minute as well, that would be great. Any feedback that you have would be awesome.
So the question that I have, and I understand this, this situation that is not the situation we are in right now, right? Because a lot of us are in remote learning, it's the pandemic. So is there something that there's no mention of that here, right? So it's not just about what's here. There should be more to it. My opinion is maybe we should tie something in regarding this new environment that we're in, and it's hard for me to talk about this, but the social emotional issues going on with the students that are home and doing remote instruction. Is it in here? I don't see it.
No, and actually we Mike and I were thinking the same thing, but we actually.
You're talking about suspension rates, but there's not much schooling right now, right? There's not in-person schooling.
This is a question for you, Gus. I mean, we were also concerned that looking at suspension rates is something that we're flagged for as a district, but I'm happy to open up the conversation of aligning it to something else, right? So I think one of the things Mike has been working on our guidance counselors with, and actually promoting this across the school is a true school-wide tiered counseling plan and what that looks like, right? So how do you target kids? How do we know what that looks like? What are are we appropriately aligning social, emotional, and other types of supports to our students in need during this time? So if everyone is in agreement, I think Mike and I can play with that a little more and think about ways to connect it. But if there's other ways people want to.
So Joe, I agree with you. I think the big key piece to this whole goal, I mean, this last part is almost an add-on, just because the reality is that there's a hope that we do go back to the buildings at some point, and we know that suspension rates is always a concern. But the crux of this goal really is about our schools developing a very clear school-wide tiered counseling plan, which right now every single building has developed this counseling plan with a school-based team. In many cases, it was their case team that we've talked about before at the DLT. With the goal of that whole idea of this implementation of strategic social emotional learning, because we do know, and maybe we can add in language, Joe, about the hope between blended and remote learning environments, because I think there are a need on both sides of it. Maybe we can include that language to make it more explicit. But I think the qualitative part of this goal is really that every single school has a very clear plan of how they're going to provide social emotional learning, and more importantly, how they are going to follow up on it. So what you guys will see, and what an expectation is that every building has a means of gathering some social emotional learning data on their kids. And that's also part of the plan so that we can monitor it throughout the school year. But I do hear you, and I think maybe we can play around with the language inside of the goal to make sure that we're referencing the current state that we're in, which is both in school and at home.
Yeah, Mike, I definitely think that you need to adjust it in terms of the special circumstances that we're in, but also remember that some of the special needs and circumstances can be addressed in the action plan. So in the action plans and in the monitoring, you can address some of those aspects as well.
I mean, we might be able to tie it to something in reference to.
I think qualitatively, I mean, we can legitimately review and analyze school-wide tier counseling plans. So in a qualitative sense, we have data that we can review on a routine basis as a DLT and certainly as a district, just in terms of the plans themselves and how they're being monitored at the school level. The idea of reduction of the disproportional suspension rates, I don't think that we're going to have very high suspensions period this year, just given the climate, but that part of it can be taken out if that's what you guys think.
I'm just reading it that the purpose of this paragraph is to reduce the disproportional suspension rates across the middle school. So just maybe the way it's, put something before that, right? Like,
yeah, just the one part, the idea of district disproportionality is also about taking a look at the data that we do have on kids. Are we seeing patterns of support that's needed across our subgroups, particularly during this time? So it's not just about suspension rates, which is why that part of it perhaps can be adjusted. Idea of disproportionality goes beyond just looking at suspensions. It looks at information that we currently have. It might be on absenteeism. We might have certain subgroups of children that are chronically out that we need to address because the social emotional learning supports are not presented for them, that kind of thing. But I hear you, and we can definitely adjust the language to make this clearer.
Yep. Okay, we can work on that one.
Yeah, and I'm going to put a big set of question marks at the end so that we revisit the language.
mean, maybe put, disproportional retention on behalf of the students in terms of instruction, something along that line.
Oh, and we could actually maybe, Mike, where's our attendance? I mean, we could tie it to attendance.
Yeah, and that one's more
Engagement and blended and remote learning.
that one we embedded into the parent goal, which is next.
Right, but we could do it here too.
Yeah.
I mean, it's about, I mean, we could talk more about it, but thinking about student engagement and blended and online learning.
Yeah.
That looks like. Or improvement, or not, it's not necessarily improvement because it's hard for us to connect a baseline to it, but just something about student work products.
Yeah, I like the engagement language too.
Yep.
Okay. All right, so this one we will definitely revisit, and based on your feedback, play around with the language so that we can get it in a better place. Okay. This one, I guess, Danielle, we'll have to figure out the area of concentration based on what was provided. I'm assuming they'll have a chronic absenteeism drop down. Gus, they'll have a chronic absenteeism drop down, I'm assuming. Or parent engagement, however, I'm not sure what the drop downs will be.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm thinking we could also apply this to just parent participation in meetings. I mean, we could do that as well. Like, I mean, I know it's chronic absenteeism.
Yeah, so give this one a look. We were, when we were putting this goal together, it was really about because we've seen such an increase in community involvement through the varied technology platforms that we have. We really wanted to continue with that momentum that we've seen as a result of the use of these tools, so that it's happening across our buildings routinely, whether we go back or not. Hopefully when we go back into the building, we still create these opportunities for our families to engage in these meetings in a virtual way because it's been successful. So this goal was really about making sure that we keep those diverse communication systems going, including the use of tech, with the goal of also supporting through that outreach and improvement in chronic absenteeism and engagement rates. But your thoughts here as well would be great.
I like this one.
Okay.
Anyone else? Okay, great. So right now it looks like the one we have to do the most heavy lifting on is the supportive environment goal, which we will definitely go back and revisit for sure. Now the other two, and I know we have high schools on here. I don't know if this is going to change any for you guys in terms of overall graduation rate. In District 25, where the goal was to increase by 1% by August 2021. And the other part, and I'm not sure how relevant these numbers are going to be now, in terms of increasing college and career civic readiness accountability to by, it looks like 5 points. I'm not sure. Lenine, Deputy Gibson, right? I'm
Yes,
sorry.
that's what, yes.
If there's anything here that you guys have adjusted or plan to change inside of the high school piece.
Yes, we can talk about that. I don't know if you want to discuss it here or offline.
Oh yeah, no, we can. It's just in the event that there are changes here, just to kind of bring that forward so that we can adjust as necessary.
Sure.
Okay. And that's pretty much where we stand with our goals at this point. And it brings us to a really important question. Danielle, is there anything else you wanted to say before I move forward?
Nope.
Okay. Which brings us to a really important place. And this is a question, Danielle and I were going through a variety of different webinars and videos and researchers to kind of get to a good place of where we want our schools to go. And Danielle found a really great clip in a webinar series that was being done by a panel of experts in the field of education. And one of the questions that they posed, and I'm going to ask you guys to reflect on this question now. What are the conditions for deep and powerful learning to happen? Was a question that Will Richardson raised. And I want you guys to reflect on that just for a minute, as whether you are a parent, a teacher, an administrator, what does this question mean for you in your own mindset as in your particular role that you play in education right now? What are the conditions for deep and powerful learning to happen? I just want you to think about that. We're not going to answer that question yet, but we're going to come back to it. And I think it's an important question for us to have, given the current state of where we are, both in school and remotely. So just take a few seconds to think through that. What you would say, what are those conditions? And Louis, if you're there, just in the event that this does not play, I know that we had a little bit of an issue last time. I heard it, but you guys weren't unable to. If you could just have it ready in the background.
I'm ready, Dr. Mike.
Okay, perfect.
I mean, I'm not ready, but I'll be ready.
You will be.
I don't even know. I have to go find the link again.
I will send it to you.
I hear it.
Okay, good.
I hear it. Go big.
All right, yeah, hold on. I just got to rewind a little bit, everyone. Sorry.
Basically, they have to.
This is like a 2-hour video, so Dr. Mike is showing one portion of it.
It's that, schools don't really equal learning. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that happens in schools that really doesn't constitute learning. A lot of stuff where kids learn it for the test, and then as soon as the test is over, they unlearn it. They let it go. It doesn't matter to them. It's not relevant to them. And the only reason they quote unquote learn it is because basically they have to. So one of the things that has gotten me through this crisis is the site McSweeney's. I don't know if any of you are familiar with McSweeney's, but it's a whole bunch of satire. It's really done well. And this was my favorite. The title of this one was, "We the Hardworking New."
Sorry,
for about the last 6 or 7 years around the world, as I presented to literally hundreds of thousands of people, I'll always ask them, what are the conditions for deep and powerful learning to happen? What is it that we require to really learn deeply? And it's been astounding, the consistency of the answers that I've gotten. Everyone says that for deep and powerful learning to happen, you have to have a safe learning environment. It has to have real world application. It has to have relevance. It has to have a real audience. There has to be passion. It's not constrained. It's flow. And no one disagrees with any of these. When you see this list, everyone kind of nods their heads. And I want you to do a gut check right now at this particular moment, in this particular session, how many of those conditions exist for you? You're here because you have agency. You chose to be here. You chose to engage in these presentations, and there's a real purpose for it. There's relevance, or you wouldn't be here. Stephen asking what you're drinking and whether you're wearing socks, there's an element of fun to it, right? And so these conditions exist no matter where we are in terms of when we learn most powerfully and deeply. But here's what people never ever say when I ask that question: what are the conditions required for deep and powerful learning to happen? No one ever says any of these things. Never. In 6 years, no one has ever said any of these things. And it doesn't matter if you're talking about these conditions in your face-to-face world or in an online environment. If you're recreating these conditions in an online environment, you're not creating conditions for learning to happen at a deep level. And this is an unpleasant truth that I don't think we've struggled with enough. But now I think we are being forced to struggle with that, because the question now is, in a world of real uncertainty and really fast change, which of those two lists do you think is going to serve your kids best? Which of those two lists is going to help them thrive in the type of environment and a type of future that I think we all know is coming at us? So this moment, in some very interesting ways, is forcing us to identify what we really value about schools. And I think it's very interesting what we're choosing to undo about schools. We are undoing IB exams. We are undoing grades. We are undoing the idea that you have to get the full curriculum. Traditional AP tests are out, seat time, schedules. so many of the traditional structures and so many of the traditional practices that we have in schools, we are choosing to undo those things. And basically, it begs the question, what are you going to keep undoing once this is over? What is going to be on your to undo list? What of that stuff that you're currently setting aside will you bring back? Or what of it will you look at and say, why were we doing that in the first place? Why were we doing a lot of the things that basically now we've been forced not to do? And that's one of the most important questions, I think, that we can be asking moving forward. So we are in serious learning mode right now. There is no question. We are learning our way through this crisis. And on some level, that's really powerful, extremely profound. And it does, I think, mean that we're going to have to ask all sorts of big questions. Just one little piece of promotion. If you go to bigquestions.institute, my colleague Homa Tavanger and I are doing a lot of this work in terms of what are the questions that people need to be asking right now, and how can they ask them in ways that will lead them to maybe a different way of thinking about schools afterwards. But I'm going to tell you, I'm going to give you 4 questions that I think, I'll leave you with 4 questions that I think are really, really important right now. First one is, how do you define learning? What is it? And how have you shared that definition and articulated it? And most importantly, how are you living it? How, if you observe what's happening in your online school or face-to-face school, what does that speak to in terms of what you believe about how learning happens? Do you really believe that learning happens when kids are age grouped, sitting in rows, timed, graded, all that kind of stuff? Do you really believe that those are the best conditions for learning? Second one is, what are you learning about learning right now? How are you learning based on your own process through this, your own way of kind of dealing with this? And what about your teachers? What are they learning about their craft and their practice? And what are your students learning? And are you asking them? Are you talking to them? Are you getting meta with them? I think that that's a really important thing to do right now, is to have these conversations about learning and ask them what's different, what's working, what's not working. What are the values and systems and structures that matter most right now? What are the things that you are choosing to do and prioritizing with kids? And why are you prioritizing those things? How does that speak to, again, the things that you value and the ways that you look at your purpose in the world? And finally, how are you personally learning into the future? You know, this is the most amazing time to be a learner, I think, in history. And so who are you reading, and how are you connecting with people, and what are you creating and sharing as well? How are you sharing the learning that you're doing into the world? I think those are some of the really important questions that are going to be very important to ask, because I know and you know that when we get through this, the pull is going to be to go back to where we were, because it's easier, because we know it, because we can function in it. But I'm going to suggest to you that normal is kind of going away. And I think that we may be on the verge, not of the new normal, but of the no normal, where basically things change so quickly and there's very little to anchor to, that it's going to be difficult for us to simply continue the practices that we've used in the past in order to create kids who can thrive in the future. So I'll leave you with this quote: in a volatile world, rigid equals brittle, and institutions that can't figure out how to work differently may not work at all. And so I hope that when you get a chance to breathe, that you will figure out how to work differently, because as difficult as this moment is, I think that is the opportunity that it presents, and that's the opportunity that I hope all of us have a chance to seize. So thanks so much for giving.
So if I can ask all of you just to take a few minutes and just kind of think about what resonated you about what Will Richardson said. What wonderings, questions did this video clip raise for you? And, you know, part of the reason why, you know, we found this video to be really aligned with our thinking is this whole idea of learning. You know, we believe in the district that every single one of us needs to be a learner to continue to grow and improve, especially at this time. You know, one of the things that we included in here, and this is, as we were talking, Danielle said, we need to include the idea that, our strong commitment for learning together for our students has never been more important than it is right now. So if you can take, and I'm going to stop sharing just for a moment so we can come back and just have a quick chat about that question. What has resonated with you about that video, and what questions or wonderings do you have as a result of that video? But I do think it's important that everyone just kind of thinks through that and comes together for a quick chat, and then we'll move on. So just take a minute just to think about what you just heard Will Richardson talk about, and how that impacted you as in your role on this DLT. And some of you have multiple roles. Some of you are not only teachers, but your parents, and vice versa. So think about it through those perspectives, and we'll come back in 1 minute, and I'm hoping you guys have some things to share. Another 20 seconds. All right, guys, if you have anything that you feel resonated with you from what Will Richardson shared, or you have questions or wonderings about what he shared, love to hear it. Feel free to unmute yourselves and share out.
I always hate to start first. I don't want to be rude. So can I wait, or you want me to start?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So I like the video because regardless, this is the state that we're in, right? So can't change that. But I do believe that it requires a lot of responsibility and maturity on the level of the student, right? Because it will probably be easier for the upper grades than the lower grades. So I'm thinking more in line of my daughter who's in middle school. But I think that, like I wrote down some words, and, focus, clarity, and engagement are the things that I think my daughter really would need. And I did like, in the video, the list on the left, obviously, is the one that I would want to use. But the real world application and relevance. So it's easy for us as adults to think that, but the key is, how do you get the student to see that and believe that? And then you'll make progress.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Joe. Anyone else? Yeah, Lenine, I agree. Changing mindset really super important, especially where we are right now. It's never been more relevant than it is today, that we have to really think through where we are and how we progress forward.
Some of the things that that Mike and I talked about that I've been thinking a lot about as a parent and as an educator is that, the things my parents talked to me about when I was getting, from my schooling, and the things that they would be able to help me with, and the careers that they guided me towards were very similar to the life that they had. I mean, we do know that with the addition of technology and that it has changed our world, but not as dramatically as I feel is happening right now, where Will Richardson talks about this no normal, because we have nothing to ground it in, because everything is happening so quickly. And, if you guys spend some time reading, watching his work, and then there's this other piece called the Silver Lining Initiative, and it really talks about, it's just a bunch of educators who are getting together and talking about looking at ways to transform education for kids, right? Because what we do know, and they've said this for years, is that our children will have 6, 7, 8 careers, right? I mean, I've had the same career for 25 years. It's just very different. I think about my father, who was a printer, who his job was completely made obsolete in the 90s, right? And how we establish school to prepare for that. And that is really around critical thinking and problem solving, and not necessarily becoming something. And that is, I think, you know, when they talk about like the current school system sets us up to become something and not apply, you know, our learning to who we are and what we can contribute to our global world. And I think that's where I'm starting in this. And as you know, one of the things that Chris Deed in one of the interviews talks about, he talks about the QWERTY keyboard, you know, the keyboard that we use every day to type. And he says that the initial design of the QWERTY keyboard was created to keep a typer from typing slowly so a typewriter wouldn't jam. And how over the years, just based on technology, they've created keyboards that would work so much better than the QWERTY keyboard for what we need to do today, and yet nobody is willing to change it. And he talks about, like, that's the narrative of schools, that we're deeply ingrained in our own personal experiences, and that's what causes us to do the same thing over and over and over again. So how can we sort of engage in discussions about what we should keep, right? What was good learning, and how does that apply to the world today and in the future? And what are some of the things that we do that we don't necessarily need to do anymore, and have those kind of conversations. So, and do those things work now? You know, so the things that we were doing in the past, and it kind of, you know, it really, they show, those practices show themselves as maybe ones that are not appropriate for, especially for where we are right now in this pandemic, to continue to revisit. You know, so they become interesting questions for all of us to kind of have. And, you know, everyone's got a different viewpoint of it, right? So if you're at home, you get to see your kids. You know, are they in the place where you would want to see them as a parent at home? You know, in school, are they as engaged as we'd like them to be in the building? And what are some of those moves that are or are not engaging them? You know, so those become really important questions for us to have. Why that video really resonated with me is to really take a critical look at where we are and what we need to do in order to make sure that kids are engaged. Oh, we just lost Mike. You know, did you have something? Yes.
I have something to say. The video really held a lot to me in the sense of where our education is going today, versus the old school way of going to school and the new version now, because unfortunately, because of this pandemic, we're all remote, half and half. So, like, I see from my point of view, being home with my kids right now, when they're in the blended, when they're home, they're not engaged. But where they're in school and they're face to face with their teacher, they have to be engaged because they're there facing their teacher. You know, I have a high schooler and a middle schooler, so I see the difference between them saying, okay, well, I could turn off my camera and they won't ask me to put my camera on as long as they saw me for attendance. But I could walk and go to the bathroom. They won't even realize I went to the bathroom and come back. Whereas in school in person, they have to be accountable for these actions and they have to pay attention. Yes, we all days in school, we're in school a little bit, you know, our brains go somewhere else sometimes, but they have to be in the present, in the moment. So they have to soak up all the information that the teacher's telling them in person. Whereas I feel like when they're remote, they're hearing it, but they're not soaking it up, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense. But I also think it has not been a learning tool in the way it is now that they're familiar with. And as well as working now with our teachers to sort of change how we engage students, right? So now you're home in a different environment. And in addition, it's also about bringing parents into the conversation, because now you're part of the learning. You see it every day, right? So, and how we can come together to start those discussions, which is why You're going to hear Dr. Mike and I spend a lot of times talking about chats. We're doing different learning chats with different groups of constituencies across the district and asking these big questions, right? So we're starting, we have our parent coordinators engaging in parent chats. Myself and Esther, we're working through parent chats. We're going to be doing teacher chats and principal chats just to kind of start talking about this and getting people to, express what they're thinking, what they're seeing, what they know, and what's good for kids. Because I do know as a community, we've always been that way, right? Like we've always done what we know is good teaching and learning, what's good teaching and learning for kids. We've been able to communicate what our needs are as a district. We're going to continue to do that. But what we do know is, I don't think anybody's happy with the current virtual learning. And that's what Will Richardson also talks about, like, are we doing distance learning or distance teaching? And right now we're doing distance teaching, right? Where, our teachers are logging online and they're trying their best and they're planning through things and they're doing what they know. So they're trying to fit what they know into a virtual world. And that's where we need to disrupt that and start talking about that because we do know in the end that distance learning has to happen and it's happened before, right? So it's about looking at good models, what that looks like. We do know that it takes a whole other layer of thinking and agency and students understanding that, yes, you can get up and use the bathroom when you're at home the same way you would at school. But how do you commit to a lesson that's happening? What is the end product? What do you need to produce? And where is your learning and how do we know it, right? So I think we're in a good place to begin that work as a district. And I'm actually excited for the first time in a long time in terms of this pandemic. I'm excited to do this because this is a good place to start for us. And we wanted to be able to show that to the DLT today.
I kind of agree with Laura and I'm experiencing it as well, but we have to go to like the next level and move forward. Like, so my wife and I, we argue every day over who's staying home because now we're both career people. And it's a change more than just the student. It's a whole, everything is changing, right? So, I'm home today because my daughter's home. I should be working. So it creates all this other stress outside of the education process. So it's a big change for everyone. And it's, and we make it work, but I'm sure there are families that can't make it work and don't have that luxury of being able to stay home. So I think we have to acknowledge what the issues are and then go to the next level and say, okay, can't change it right now. What do we do to make it productive, right? So it's not like we want to be here, but we have no other choice, right? And maybe it's a balance of both sides, right? I traditionally think that kids need to be in school, but that's my way of thinking. So we need to start changing that and try to bring balance to make it work and be realistic also. But it's not an easy task.
I agree.
Agreed. Yeah, and I think the part that is exciting is in a sense is that we have a lot of learning that we have to do. We don't have a choice but to learn to get better at everything that we're doing. Administratively and supervision, we have to get better at how we're going to do that. Teaching, we have to get better at how we're doing it. It's not because anyone's not trying really hard. Everyone is. It's just we're in a situation that we haven't been in. No one's been in where we are right now as an educator, or as a parent. So it is a place that I think we need to to continue to have our mind's eye on and move forward. So having said that, I'm going to bring us back to the presentation, and we have just one or two more things to do, and we'll close it out for this part of our process. But we wanted to make sure that everyone's mind was in a place that Danielle and I were in right now for moving us forward as a district. Okay. So this next little next piece is a part, and it's very connected to where we were. As a district, we identified a few areas, and I'm just going to blow this up a little bit just so you can see it a little bit more clearly.
This is actually an activity we did with our principals. And this idea of empowerment definition is something that we brought up, I think 2 years ago, right, Mike?
Yes, yeah. So when we created the vision for the district around growing together around for our children's future, we also talked about this idea of the scope of the work, and that social emotional learning, creativity, ownership, problem solving, critical thinking, and then the last part of this is empowerment. And within empowerment, we identified a series of things that we felt were important to ensuring that we were empowering our kids in our schools. One, identifying curricular topics that are meaningful and relevant. And some of these things it should sound familiar from what you saw Will Richardson just talk about.
Yeah, but Mike, can I just interrupt you for a quick
sure.
second? So one of the things, if you look to the left side of the definition, the third sentence where it says empowered learners believe the work they do makes a difference to their own growth and the world they are part of. And it is a work that is meaningful and has an impact. And so all of last year, just so you know, these were questions that Dr. Mike and I asked students when it came to our visits to schools and we were meeting with our students. We were asking them about social emotional learning, but then we were also asking them about the value of their work. We didn't use the word rigor. We found other ways to kind of get to that, but is the work that they're doing aligned to high level work, and do they believe there's value in it and that they're growing from it? And we got some really low responses from the kids. So we also think that this is a great next step for us, not just during this time of a pandemic, but starting with what we know that currently, regardless of what we as adults feel that work is valuable and work that's important, our kids don't find value in it for a lot of reasons. And I think we have to kind of merge that, and that's, so what we think is important work to get something accomplished, right? Learning to write script or, doing your math times tables. Our kids want more than that. It was good enough for us to do that when we were in school. It's not good enough for them. They need to know so much more in order to be productive in society, right? So how do we come together as a community to merge what these expectations of the no normal should look like, and then at the same time hear the voices of our kids and say, is this work that we're doing valuable, and am I growing as a student in participating in that? So go ahead.
Yeah, and so basically in a nutshell, these are some expectations that we aligned with this idea of empowering learners, and it's around ensuring that there's opportunities for self-assessment, opportunities for risk-taking, opportunities to receive feedback on the growth of their work. And so when we were thinking about this idea of empowerment and also doing some additional researching and looking for things.
Wait, one more thing. Go back, Mike, one more thing. And then I'm going to stop talking. Yep. I love that last bullet, promote an understanding that mistakes are opportunities to learn and grow. I just want to say to you that we as adults believe in a testing culture. When you believe in a testing culture and you value your students' growth based on tests that they get from their teacher, one of the things that we do know is that it limits students' opportunities to learn and grow. When everything is about how well they do on a test, if we promote that in a school and we promote that at home, then that is maybe part of the conversation that we can start at. That, we did this in our early childhood work with Bank Street, where they were saying, what was it, my favorite no, right, Mike? Yeah. My favorite no, where it was like, here's my favorite mistake that I made in math. Think about that, right? Where a mistake is not something where you're ashamed of and you take a pencil and you have to erase, or it is, I'm going to cross this out. This is my favorite mistake that I've made, because you know why? I've learned from it. Now, when you say that as an adult and you think back of your experiences and you say, I've learned from this mistake, we spend of our lives as parents trying to prevent that for our kids. And one of the things that we realize now, and especially in terms of learning, is that you have to let them make similar mistakes. You have to let them make mistakes so they can grow. And I think that is an example of something that we as adults need to relook at. Go ahead.
Yeah. So in an article that was in Edutopia, there was, and there was a bunch of different articles around this type of stuff, but it's just one that I happened to land on, and I thought the list was appropriate because it was connected to the things that we heard from Will Richardson. But Heather Wolpert-Gowron wrote an article about, what the students say about engagement. And she did a poll. It was a couple of hundred kids. And these are some of the things that they wound up saying inside of the article. Working with their peers, working with technology, real world application, should sound familiar. Clearly loving what they were doing, talking about teacher passion, being able to get up, move around, bringing in visuals, student choice, and all of these types of things that we did notice. If you look side by side with what Will Rich was saying, they're very similar things, to what he also talked about in terms of real world application, things being social, developing those questions that are going to be worth them actually looking at and exploring. Many of those things are present, whether it's in Will Richardson's mindset, hearing from students, and it brings us to a question around, what do we envision empowerment to look like, sound like, feel like in a blended learning and remote learning environment? And these are questions that don't necessarily need to be answered right now, but ones that we will definitely revisit as a team. And do our expectations that we have for empowering learners align to what we see here in terms of our district-wide expectations, and do things need to be adjusted? Those are some of the questions that I'm going to ask that you guys between now and next session to really think about. What should empowerment look like, sound like, feel like in the blended and remote learning environments? Because this is how we're going to get to a place where we can start establishing some expectations for learning inside of both of those platforms. And it brings us to the final segment, which is really about, when I blew up this way too large. And what we're asking our schools to do is these three very simple questions. What are our students currently saying about learning? What are our teachers currently saying about learning? And what are our families currently saying about learning? So back at the school level, we're asking all of our building leaders to work with their schools, with their constituents in their buildings, to really ponder those three questions. What are we saying is happening with the learning in our schools right now? And how do we use what is being said to support adjustments to our practice? So those are three things, three additional things that I'm going to ask you guys to think about when you go back to your individual SLTs, to ask those questions. So what are our kids currently saying? And how are we making those adjustments to support learning moving forward? And it's going to be a year long. This is not a let's talk about this now and we're good because the kid said X, Y, and Z. It's about how do we revisit it to make sure we're in a good place as the year goes on to support our future in education and certainly our future in District 25. So any comments on that last part?
So I do want to say, this is a multi-year idea that we're beginning this year and right now we're really just starting with the conversations and the questions and looking for appropriate supports for our building leaders, our teachers, our staff members, our students. So this is not something we're going to change in just a few months. But I want to ensure that the DLT has clarity around it and that they've had feedback on the direction that we're going and that they believe in starting this process, which is why we're presenting it to you today.
And in the Pear Deck slide, there is a small little Padlet. So if you have an opportunity, you can go into the Padlet and you can enter what you believe empowering learners should look like, sound like, feel like. There is a section in there for you to add to the column. So if you can do that over the next couple of weeks, that would be great, especially if you start talking to your own kids. What do you guys think if they're, Laura, you mentioned your two kids. What would make them feel more excited about learning than having to go to the bathroom for maybe, however long they manage to make it in there and back, what would make it more engaging for them? And those are important details that, that is important for our teachers and building leaders to know, that if that's the way kids feel, we need to work on it. What do we do about it? If that's the way that they feel like, this is really not for me, I'm going to click off. And when I come back, I'll still be in the same place anyway. I'll know exactly where the teacher is and I'm good. And if that's the way that they're feeling, then we need to work through that a little bit. Also knowing we don't have the best answers yet, but we will get there based on what the feedback is we receive. And that's a wrap for me, I think, Danielle.
Okay. All right. So, Janine, are you on?
I am on. Hi.
Okay. Hi.
Nice to.
I'm also on as well to give an update. This is Lenine Gibson.
Okay. Okay. So, Janine, do you want to go first?
No. I think Lenine can go. It's nice to see you, Lenine.
Nice to see you as well, Janine.
Okay.
All right. So, good morning, everyone. I will share a few updates with you. So the first, due to the uptick in COVID cases in certain zip codes, 3 of the District 25 high schools were closed. Those schools are John Bound, RFK, and Townsend Harris. Those schools will be closed for 2 weeks, reopening in mid-October, towards the end of October. And although those schools were closed, opportunities for students to get devices in order to be able to do their, they were provided with those opportunities to come in beyond the closure of the school to come in to get those devices. In addition to that, one of our District 25 high schools, as we talked earlier about random COVID testing, one of our schools, World Journalism, also underwent the random testing as well. And I don't have permission to share my screen right now. I'd like to just share my screen to show something regarding the district's priorities. So the permissions have to be changed in order for me to do that.
Louis, can you do that?
Once it's done, let me know.
It's done.
Okay. So I just wanted to share with you the district vision and district focus and priority areas for our schools, Queens High Schools North. So for our district vision, the vision is to ensure that learning, of course, is happening across all of our schools, and students are having increased and enhanced exposure to rigorous high-level courses that will prepare them for a variety of post-graduation options. And built into that, of course, are habits of mind and skills and proficiency in knowledge. Some of the district focus and priorities include increasing the number of students across the districts that engage in blended and remote learning to ensure that they are engaged in tasks that are embedded in college ready curricula across content areas in our high schools. Also, the building the capacity in math, science, and social studies to deliver curricula that is aligned to next generation standards, and also to allow for vertical planning in this remote and blended environment so that students can indeed achieve high-level math, science, social studies, and ELA courses. And also, as we talked about earlier, the social emotional learning. One of the priorities is also to support schools with providing social emotional learning and culture responsive practices that focuses on the whole child as we are in the middle of a pandemic. And we are about to engage, we've already engaged some principals who have already discussed the need for more supports in social emotional learning, which is part of our priorities at this time. And that's the that I'd like to share at this time.
Okay, thank you, Lenine.
Thank you.
I'd just like to say, just in terms of the testing at WJPS, we had it, of course, the same day as IS 25. It was very, very smooth. I concur with everything that Superintendent Domingo said. The staff was very professional. They were very thorough. We had the room set up beforehand. Things happened very quickly, which was not the fault of anybody. You know, I think it was just, you know, the rush to get the testing underway, but we got it done. I had the test myself and it was very easy. It was painless. It was quick. You know, it was just, it was a positive experience all around.
Good. Thank you, Janine. Okay, any new business? All right, at this time, can I have a motion to adjourn?
Just one comment, if I may.
Yes.
I just want to be clear, Christine and Charlene, and DLT and Superintendent, in terms of the PAC training and Title I, I'm not relying on FACE or anybody else. You tell me when you want it done, and I will take whatever PowerPoint they use on the 16th. I will adjust it. I will send it to all of you for your comments and additions, and we will schedule it. I've done, as you know, Title I training on my own, both citywide and for the district for many, many years. So I will take care of my district.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Gus.
Okay.
Okay, so our next meeting is Monday, November 9th. I thank all of you for agreeing to meet with us on Tuesday. And if there's nothing else, can I get a motion to adjourn the meeting?
I motion it to adjourn.
Okay, Laura, second.
I second, Warner.
Thank you, Janine. Okay. All right, everyone. If there's nothing else, have a great rest of your day. And I know I will be speaking to all of you individually before the next, you know, our next meeting on the 9th. Laura, just confirm with Esther if it's okay for us to come and do some, have some discussion with you guys around the random testing at the next President's Council, okay?
Yes, we'll do.
All right, and Gus, I'll be in touch with you about those training dates. Thank you so much.
Great.
All right.
Stay safe, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Bye.
Bye-bye.